Good evening. This is Ruth L. Snyder joining you from Bonnyville, Alberta, Canada. And I'm happy to be here for day 9. Hard to believe that we have been doing this for 9 days, well, 8 days plus today already. It's gone so quickly and it has been so enjoyable. Such a variety of authors and books and readings. And we had fun drawing some prizes the other night. I'm just entering a password for my son's computer so that he is happy while I'm on here. But I'm going to invite Kim on, and she has agreed to interview me tonight. So here we go.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our 12 days of Christmas. The tables have turned, and I get to interview Ruth. So, Ruth, do you call yourself a writer? And if you do, why?
Whoops. I was going to let Kim answer her own question. Yes, I call myself a writer. I did not call myself a writer until after I won a writing contest. I enjoyed reading and writing most of my life because, as some of you already know, I grew up in Southern Africa. My parents were missionaries there. And so I met all of my relatives through reading and writing letters. But it wasn't until I entered that writing contest that was sponsored by the Word Guild. And I won first place and flew to Ontario for their writing conference that I realized God had indeed gifted me in the area of writing and that I needed to use that gift. I needed to be faithful in using the ability that He has given me. And so, yes, I call myself a writer. You're muted, Kim.
Yes, I was. We're doing great so far.
How not to host a
Yeah, how not to host a live event. So you won a contest. That's what spurred you.
Yes.
Of course, following God's nudge, and I think that's awesome. And I don't think I knew that about you, so that was interesting to learn. So, what types of projects have you written since you've evolved into this writer? I know you're a published author, and you even have your own publishing house. So, what other types of projects have you written in, and have you gotten published? I guess.
So my first published piece was the article that I wrote, or the story that I wrote about my journey through infertility and into the world of adoption and special needs. And that was published in the Testimony magazine, which is put out by the Pentecostal Assembly of Canada. From there, I went on to write more articles and short stories. I was published in the Inscribe magazine called Fellowscript, and I entered some really fun writing contests, flash fiction. I really enjoyed those contests because we were given a prompt at the beginning of the week, and by Thursday, I believe, we had to have the story in, and it was short. It was anywhere from 500 to 1,000 words. Just a minute. I'm going to see if I can get my son to move his wonderful music a little farther away. I'll let Kim take over for a minute.
Well, I'm so glad that everybody is joining us tonight. And I hope that you've had an opportunity to join us the last 7 evenings and listen into the amazing authors that we've had on. And everyone has had an opportunity to read approximately 2 to 3 minutes of something that they have written and had published. So it's been a very fun week. And I'm so thankful that Ruth decided to put this event together and coordinate the entire thing, and to bring all these authors from all over the world that have participated. And don't forget, folks, if you are participating, make sure you put a comment on whatever platform that you're watching on, So you are in the drawing because each author is providing a book for a free gift, a free prize. So don't forget to make a comment in whatever platform you're listening on. So you are in that drawing because we have one more drawing, I think, for six more prize winners on the last night on
Yes,
December
we
9th, I
do.
believe.
Thank you for jumping in, Kim. Sorry to throw you in like that. But I knew you could handle it. So yes, so I started with shorter pieces and then I moved on to a little bit longer pieces. And the first 10,000 word story that I wrote was published in this book called The 12 Days of Christmas. And then the publisher that I worked with for that book said that he would like me to participate in some other projects as well. And so I wrote, he put me together with 5 other writers. And one of the most interesting projects, I guess, that I've been involved with was called the San Francisco Wedding Planner. And he gave us the basic characters for that series. And then each of us were asked to write 10,000 words. And so the first writer started the story off and used the characters that the publisher gave us. And then the second writer carried on from where the first writer left, and so on until we got to number 6, I was the 6th writer. And my job was to tie the story up and, get rid of all those loose ends, except for maybe creating 1 or 2 more loose ends so that we could carry on for book 2. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I felt a little frustrated with the lack of control that I had. Oh, this is another book that I published with Helping Hands Press, Uplifting Devotionals. So there were 6 Canadian authors that contributed to that. But then I was frustrated with the lack of control, and so I decided to learn how to self-publish and publish my own books. And so that's what I did. And then I thought my first book would be a devotional, but it was actually a book called Learn Twitter, to help other authors learn how to use Twitter to market their writing. And I did that because people asked me to write it. They saw what I was doing on Twitter and how effective it was for me. And so that was my first complete book, solo book that I wrote and published. And then I did write and publish my devotional that I was thinking of writing. And this is my devotional book, Equipped. And I used Ephesians 6:10-18 as the framework, but it has a lot of other scriptures and things in it. And then I did a lot of work with Inscribed Christian Writers Fellowship. I joined the executive shortly after I joined. And so I used the knowledge that I had in publishing and started a publishing arm for Inscribed Christian Writers Fellowship. And we published a book for writers. And then after that, somebody else took over the publishing arm and put together this book, Christmas Stories and More. And then this last year, we published another book. I guess it's not here right now, called Easter Stories and More. And then I met Kim, and she invited me to participate in her anthology, When Grace Found Me. And so I am in the volume 2 of that. So that's kind of my writing and publishing journey. People have saw what I did and asked me for help. And so that's kind of what led me into helping other people publish their books.
That's an amazing story. And I love hearing authors' journeys and how they started and where they went, and how you took kind of a juke in the road to do your Twitter book. And then back in to do your, more devotionals and stuff. I love that. I love the journey because you never know where it's going to take you. You never, and the people that you meet.
don't.
And Right. And it's life. Life that's where your stories are coming from, and you never know where life is going to take you. So it's a plethora of ideas for us each and every day as writers and authors. Now, I know that you have a Facebook group, which is you're building a community, and you continue to build that. Do you want to share a little bit about that? And that's for authors, both fiction and nonfiction, correct?
Yes, I welcome everybody to that group. It is mostly for nonfiction writers at this point because I focus on helping entrepreneurs who want to write a coaching book or something that will help the clients that they're reaching out to. So the Facebook group is called Entrepreneurs Write, and if you just find me on Facebook, you'll see the invitation to my group there as well. So, and on Facebook, most social media, I'm under Ruth L. Snyder. And there's a funny story about that as well. When I first got into publishing and Helping Hands Press was encouraging us to set up our social media profiles, I went on Google and searched my name, Ruth Snyder. And the first thing that popped up was the story of a woman in the early 1900s who murdered her husband with an axe. And I didn't really want to be associated with that. And so I decided to use my middle initial to differentiate myself from the other Ruth Snyder. Ruth Snyder is a fairly common name, so that's another reason I use my middle initial. There you go, Kim.
That's that just had me cracking up. So
I figured it would.
that's awesome. That's awesome. So are you going to read something from one of your books for us tonight?
I probably should, hey? I didn't.
I think so. Hey, is that a Canadian thing?
Hey?
Hey?
All right. Well, maybe I will read. Maybe I'll share. I don't share a lot about my kids, but I think I will share the story that I read to Kim and Phil last night after we signed off, because my kids have been a big part of my journey. And um, they do have special needs, but they also bring a lot of gifts to me. They are the ones that turned me into a mama bear advocate. And they are also the ones that taught me how to take big, overwhelming tasks and break them up to teeny tiny steps that are achievable. And that's one of the things that people have told me makes me a very effective coach, because I can take any project and make it seem achievable. So this is in the Uplifting Devotionals book, and I do still have copies if you want to get the whole book. This one is called The Rush to the Bus. One day when I told Levi to make his lunch, he ignored me and kept playing. I set the timer and again instructed him to get his lunch made. This time he came out of his room and threw a few choice words my way. Levi, you have 5 minutes to make your sandwich. If you don't, I'll put a roast beef sandwich in your lunch kit for you. He is particular about his lunches and does not like roast beef sandwiches. With a minute to spare, his sandwich, which he made, was in his lunch kit. His older sister even had him smiling and singing along to a silly song from a Paddington Bear movie. As soon as I showed up with Levi's hearing aids, the smile vanished. He covered both ears with his hands. Levi, why don't you want your hearing aids in today? No response. I lifted his hand off his left ear, and immediately an elbow took its place. Levi, I need you to tell me why you don't want your hearing aids in. Still, no response. I remembered the school was having some issues with his FM system. More than one piece of equipment on the same radio frequency, resulting in Levi hearing instructions from another classroom. Just an aside here, one day he got up out of his desk and went to get his lunch. And the teacher couldn't figure out why he was doing that because she hadn't said anything about going and getting lunches. But Levi had heard through his FM system another teacher in another classroom who was telling her class to go get their lunches. So I can only imagine how frustrating that was for him. You need to wear one hearing aid today. Your right one doesn't have the FM on it. How about if I put that one in for you? He peeked at me, still not totally convinced. However, he did allow me to put the right hearing aid in. Time for jackets. 4 kids raced for jackets. Levi marched to his room. I helped my youngest daughter and then went looking for Levi. He was still in his room. As I entered, Levi hit the floor, crawling under the bed. I caught him and sat him on my lap. Buddy, it's time to go to school. He shook his head. All morning, he had been telling me by his actions that he did not want to go to school. Time was ticking. I knew the bus was coming. What should I do? I shot up a quick prayer and then told Levi we needed to go to the bus. He walked beside me, silent. Ahead of us, the other children frolicked and played. A few minutes later, the bus pulled up. I hugged Levi and glanced at his face. Tears dripped off his chin, but he marched onto the bus. My heart was heavy as I turned back towards the house. Lord, did I do the right thing today? Thank you that you're with Levi. Please help him to have a good day. Fortunately, this story does have a happy ending. Levi came home all excited about a new project starting at school. Phew. Getting kids out the door to the bus every morning can be challenging enough for most families. However, when kids have special needs, the challenge is even greater. We perform a delicate dance each day, taking into account the individual needs of each child while also making sure necessary tasks are accomplished. Perhaps you have a friend who has a child with special needs. Here are some ways my friends help me. Number 1, ask how you can pray for your friend and her child or his child. Number 2, provide a listening ear. Sometimes your friend may just need to vent. Number 3, learn about the child's special needs. If you feel comfortable and have the required skills, offer to provide respite for your friend so he or she can do something they enjoy. Father, thank you for the gift of children with special needs and that they help us better understand your amazing love. Give me the strength and patience I need to reach out to those around me who are dealing with the challenges special needs present. Amen.
That's such an awesome story. And thank you for sharing. And you shared it last night, and I was just touched all over again by hearing it tonight. And as we chatted last night, I've not walked in your shoes, but I can only, and I can't say I can only imagine because I can't, how difficult certain things in certain days may have been. And you have more than one child with special needs, correct?
I do. I have 5.
5. So yeah, I think that not a one of us, I think, put ourselves in your shoes, but I think that you worded it quite nicely because you said, yes, they have special needs, but they're also huge gifts and you're gifted with something and little blessings every day. So I
Mhm.
just think that's awesome. And thanks again for sharing that part of your story.
You're welcome. And thank you for helping interview me tonight.
You are more than welcome.
Do you have something that you want to read before I take you off the screen?
Sure, I'll go next.
Okay.
This is from my first book that I wrote on my own. And it's actually a compilation, and it's not available anymore. But it's a compilation of different stories over a certain, like a 12-year period of time, that from my story as a veteran and then talking and interviewing other veterans and how they impacted my life. So this book here is called Snapshots, The Veteran's View. It is out of print. I am revising that, and it will be re-released with additional stories in it. It's going to be tweaked. So I'm looking for, that's one of my projects I'm going to be working on next year, one of 4. But this story here, I entitled it An Unexpected Journey, and it's a very personal story. It's mine, and it's not easy to read. But I'm going to read it anyway tonight because I think I'm supposed to. I grew up in a small town in a single parent home with 1 brother and 2 sisters. There was not a lot to do in our community, so we made our own fun. Flashlight tag, riding bikes, playing neighborhood flag football, and building forts in the woods. My sisters and I quickly learned how to stick up for ourselves, especially if we wanted to play the same games as all of the boys, as we were only 2 of 3 girls in our neighborhood. Looking back on those years, I see my younger self as a stubborn yet determined tomboy who knew she could do anything and was willing to prove it. I was an average student and a good athlete. I enjoyed spending time sitting alone in a quiet upstairs hallway of our home, reading and listening to music. 1 month after graduating from high school, I entered the military. I was ready to leave my small town behind and looked forward to an adventure. As I boarded the bus and watched as my family and hometown disappeared behind me, I envisioned the exciting future that I was about to experience. I arrived at basic training ready to take on the world. Men and women were quickly separated, and I joined 38 other females who would become my family for the next 8 weeks. There was no privacy and no quiet. We were together all day, every day, eating, sleeping, living, and working. And this was really hard for me at first, as I was accustomed to having that alone time, that time to myself. Most aspects of basic training came very easy for me, as I was in great physical shape and I excelled in the physical conditioning portion. However, being a stubborn young tomboy, what came hard for me was the keep your mouth shut, don't look your instructor in the eye, and obey all orders. As a new recruit, I learned very quickly how to adapt. I simply had to. Graduating from basic training, I received a top secret security clearance and was assigned to a military intelligence job. I had a promising future filled with potential, so off to my first duty station I went. And for the next 3 months, where I was stationed, I was the only female at this location. And surprisingly, I missed those 38 bunkmates that I had in basic training. The days on the base were routine. Wake up at 0500, go running, shower, dress, head to chow, and then head to my assignment for the day. I spent most evenings in the barracks reading. I had a quiet building entirely to myself, and it became my refuge. On a rare night, out with a couple of friends to see a movie, my world changed forever. I was verbally and physically threatened by 2 individuals and forced into a vehicle, taken away, and later sexually assaulted by both of them. Not wanting anyone to find out, after I was able to escape, I kept this traumatic event to myself. Who would I tell anyway? Who's going to believe me? Keeping this secret began to wear on me mentally, physically, and psychologically. And my daily routine became filled with fear and insecurity. People around me noticed a drastic change in my demeanor and my appearance, and they became concerned. I was encouraged by those higher than me in rank to go see the base chaplain to discuss whatever it was that was bothering me. Eventually, I did seek out a chaplain and revealed the truth to him, believing that it would be kept confidential. It was not. And before I knew it, my commanding officer was informed. Word spread around the base like wildfire, and all hell broke loose. I was instantly subtly threatened by friends of my assailants, and 2 escorts were assigned to me for my own safety. My self-confidence and self-worth slowly diminished. While things have changed significantly for females in the military at that time, it was not appropriate to take a stand or question those higher in rank. I was an 18-year-old female trying to cope in a male-dominated environment. I knew that telling the truth and revealing the assault would be a huge personal risk for me. What I didn't realize at the time was the potential jeopardy to the long-term military careers of those who supported me, as well as my own personal journey moving forward. And that's just a portion of my story.
I have tears, Kim. I can only imagine. I haven't been through that, but thank you for sharing. I know there's lots of people, unfortunately, that do go through that. And you may not be aware, but in Canada, today is actually National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. Did you know that? Yeah,
No, I did not know that.
it is.
Huh.
It's
Maybe
commemorating.
that's what I was supposed to share my story today.
Yeah, maybe. God knows these things even when we don't.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's been 30 years since the murder of 14 young women at a college in Montreal, Quebec. And so this day has been set aside as a day of remembrance in Canada. And yes,
It's a tough topic.
it is.
But that's also one of the reasons why over the last 25 years, I've become a very strong advocate for female veterans that live with PTSD.
Well, thank you for doing that. And I know that God has given you the strength. Yes, God turns our pain. He doesn't waste it. He turns our pain into a ministry often.
That's right. He took my mess and turned it into a message.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for sharing.
You are welcome.
All right, Dr. Skip. That's a hard act to follow, I know.
I don't mind following my sister Kim. Kim, again, thank you for your courage for speaking out. I so appreciate it. And to a fellow veteran, it means a lot that you are standing up and speaking out to those atrocities. Yes, atrocities that occurred to our fellow female soldiers, airmen, others that suffer these assaults. But mind you, assaults also occur to men. And that's even more hush hush, because think about it. If you are a male service member and you get sexually assaulted, think about that, how what that does for a man when he's sexually assaulted, to go forward and to admit, I was assaulted. It happens, thankfully, less often. It shouldn't happen to anybody. But it does happen to both genders, but it never should happen to anybody.
Yes. All right. So, Skip, you had an exciting opportunity a few days ago.
I did.
Tell us about it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Ruth. I was in Vancouver, British Columbia. Yes. Last week, I was there from Monday, returned home last night, preparing for a TEDx talk on the Grandview Heights TEDx stage. And I was there with 15 other speakers, and we presented our talks. And my talk was Tough Guys Are an Endangered Species. And the essence of my talk is the difficulties that tough guys, I'm a 26-year Army veteran, spent a year and a half in combat zones, national wrestling champion. I'm a tough guy, but I became a casualty of depression. And so do many other men who consider themselves tough guys, struggle with mental illness, struggle with other problems. And the ultimate struggle is with suicidal thoughts. And unfortunately, many of those men do become casualties of depression, or of suicide, rather. Currently, there are over 300 men that commit suicide who are are active duty in the U.S. military annually, and over 33,000 men that commit suicide each year in the U.S. So it's a problem. It's a big problem. And there's millions others that struggle with mental illness. So my talk is to address that issue born out of my own experience. I felt called to do that as I was recovering from depression. And my book, I was called to share that message, and that became the genesis of my book.
So are you going to read to us from your book?
I am. My book, Wrestling Depression. Boy, I have trouble with this camera. I always have trouble with the camera on StreamYard. Wrestling Depression is not for whips. So I have a passage here that I've marked out, and I'll be very happy to read it. Thank you. I need help. April 17, 2014, I hit rock bottom. I could no longer compensate and cope. After months of struggling with depression, I felt beaten. I will never forget that eventful day when I lay curled up behind the desk in my office, the shades drawn, door locked, and the lights, phone, and pager turned off. I repeatedly asked myself, Skip, what are you doing? I did not want to deal with any problems related to patients, subordinates, or the hospital. How did I get to this point? What happened? After all, I was a 25-year Army Medical Corps veteran, a colonel, chief of my department, an accomplished clinician, and a recognized teacher. Lying behind my desk in the fetal position, I kept turning my predicament over in my mind. Skip, what are you doing? How did I get here? In the summer of 2013, a year prior to reaching this turning point, while laying on my office floor, I began noticing problems with my cognition. I struggled to get through the day, only to find myself longing for a peaceful night's sleep, unable to enjoy more than a few uninterrupted hours on most nights. I found myself turning down invitations on events that I would have normally accepted with enthusiasm. My world was shrinking, and I became increasingly inwardly focused. I lacked the interest, motivation, and energy to engage with others. I felt blue and at the same time anxious and on edge. The sensation that my heart was trembling was reflected by the obvious trembling of my hands. My world was drab and lacked the normal luster that I perceived in life. The lens that I looked at the world through became murky, and likewise, I felt my mind and my life were murky. My joie de vivre was gone. Where had it gone? Would I ever recover it again? Well, I lay on that floor in my office for hours asking, Skip, what are you doing? I finally admitted out loud, Skip, you're depressed. Go get help. With depression, I had hit the bottom. I was spent. I had no further reserves to draw upon. On that fateful day in April 2014, I decided I would begin to share my doubts, burdens, and fears. In doing so, I opened the door to the possibility of recovery and renewal. Yes, I was depressed. Yes, I needed help. I walked down to my primary care provider's clinic and requested the first available appointment with the clinic's clinical psychologist. An appointment was scheduled for the following week. After I returned to my office, I realized I did not want to wait until the following week. I called the chief of behavioral health, explained my situation, and he arranged an appointment with a clinical psychologist for that afternoon. Pardon me. I arrived at my appointment and met a very kind, gracious, and astute Army captain. She conducted a thorough intake interview, including an assessment of my risk for suicide or homicide. Before I left, she told me that she and her chief determined I was a good fit to work with another clinical psychologist, Lieutenant Colonel Mike Perry. Admitting that I was depressed provided the impetus to seek help, and my first appointment with the psychologist cracked the door to my recovery. No one wants to suffer, yet suffering eventually finds us at some point in our life. I tell others that if you have not experienced a deep, life-changing suffering, you simply have not experienced enough life. Sooner or later, profound suffering knocks on each of our doors. I had been battered by suffering for 10 months before I admitted I was depressed and was formally diagnosed. We can try to ignore suffering, but to no avail. I tried to minimize my suffering, ignore it, deny it, scream it away, pray it away. Yet, it became my constant unwanted companion. Even in the best of moments, it resolutely stood next to me. I could not free myself from its powerful grasp. I was no match for this overpowering foe. Suffering, suffering, suffering.
Powerful words. Thank you, Skip.
You're welcome.
And it's true. We all go through suffering sooner or later. Some people, like Kim, go through it at a very young age, and others of us not so young, but we all go through suffering. And we can't choose what happens to us, right? But we can choose how we respond to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. I'm going to bring Julie on the stage now. Welcome, Julie.
Hi there.
Are you
Sorry.
ready to read to us?
I've missed you guys the last few days. We're moving and we had a very full weekend. So
No worries. Every day we found some people that were eager to participate. But I'm glad you're back.
yeah.
How's moving going?
The move is going well. We have pretty much everything we need to have in storage, and now we're just waiting to make sure that all the things work the way they're supposed to, so we can sell one house and buy another one. And I'll be very glad when this is over.
Yes. So what do you want to share with us this evening?
I'm going to read, I'm kind of moving through my book, Weathering the Grief Storm, about losing my husband to cancer and finding myself after he died. And I'm going to talk about what happened right after he died tonight. I'm going to read a section in the book, the chapter called How Will I Go On? Sounds
like something that will be useful to many people.
Okay. And again, I hear you, Kim. This is I'll be glad the rest of the week I'm reading things that happen after he died, and it's a lot easier to read. These are not easy for sure to read.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you've never suffered a profound loss, it's hard to really imagine how intensely painful it is. In the days after John's death, I experienced unbelievable, almost unbearable sadness, mixed with sweet moments with good friends and family, laughing at things he would have said and crying because I would never hear him say certain things again. During those first few weeks, I woke up every morning thinking, just for an instant, in that hazy in-between place of sleeping and waking, that he was still beside me. I longed with all my might for it to be true, grief replacing that instant of hope once I finally became conscious. Every morning, I would get out of a bed that was completely undisturbed on one side, and face again the inescapable singleness of that act. I constantly wondered how I could possibly live another day without him. I witnessed the reality that he was really, truly never coming back start to sink in like a pebble slowly spiraling to the bottom of a lake. The first week after John's death was one of firsts and lasts. I found myself floating in unfamiliar water, doing my best to navigate the rough parts, and most often just barely keeping my head above the waves. I felt incomplete and alone and lost. Mostly I wanted some semblance of normal back into my life, but I was also keenly aware that I was not ready for it yet. So I just had to accept that my job My only job was to grieve. I made the choice to lean into every emotion, allowing it to take me away, not fighting or feeling the need to control like I normally would. I held no expectations about how I would feel in 10 minutes, 2 hours, or tomorrow. It was all new territory. I felt adrift in this sea of grief with no shore in sight and not even an oar to steer with, because that's where I had to be. It was terrifying and inevitable, and there was nothing to be done about it except to float. There was no action I could take to speed it along or stop it, no plans I could make about my life or the future. For the first time ever, I realized that I was just supposed to drift and be sure to hang on during the rough, scary parts. I also felt lost and very alone, even though my house was still full of people. All of a sudden, in that instant that John passed, I had lost most of my identity. I didn't know who I was. Suddenly, I wasn't a wife or a caregiver or a partner. Even though I was still a mom and a stepmom, my kids were all grown up. Sure, they still needed me, but they were adults with lives of their own. This was supposed to be our time. We had plans for what we would do once Eli, my youngest, graduated from high school in June. Now I was on my own. I didn't have any immediate responsibility for anyone but myself and my dog. I could go anywhere, do anything, be anyone I wanted to be. The opportunities were endless. I remember sharing my fears about my future with my stepdaughter, Chelsea, one night, not long after John's passed. She told me to look at it like an adventure. She said that's what her dad would tell me to do, and I knew she was right. But right then, in the sad days after he passed, it just felt incredibly overwhelmingly sad and honestly terrifying. The one person who completed me, as cliche as that sounds, who really understood me and wanted to take this adventure with me was gone, for good. Nothing I did, no amount of wishing or praying was going to bring him back. People kept telling me that he was still with me, would always be with me, and to just get quiet and I'd feel him. But I was in too much pain for that. No matter how hard I tried to connect with him, the reality was that he was just gone. There's a quote that says that there's no such thing as safe love. Real love is giving someone the power to hurt you. John never hurt me while he was alive, but having loved him as deeply and profoundly as I did, his death hurt me more than I ever imagined it would. I know John and I had an incredible love that most people don't ever get, and that made me very lucky. Amazingly, I even realized how special it was while he was loving me, which was a huge gift. In the years since he died, that's become a source of comfort and happiness to me. But in the days and weeks after he passed, it just made me hurt more. Because as the reality and finality of the fact that he was gone began to take a root for me, I also became keenly aware of what I had lost.
Thank you. Those are not easy things to share.
Definitely not. But, writing about them definitely helped me process. I don't know what I would have done if I couldn't have written during that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know that your book is helping many people.
I hope so. I do. That's, like I said, that's the reason that I spent the time, effort, and money to get it written.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah. There's some themes that I want to discuss later with everyone. So just be thinking about words like normal, alone, leaning into emotion, identity. Those are things that have been coming up over and over again tonight. So we'll talk about those a little bit later after we let Phil have a turn to read. Are you ready, Phil?
Yes, I was ready. I wasn't sure if I was going to be asked, but I'm ready. So,
we wouldn't leave you out.
It's kind of a tough act to follow those last three readings.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, what I've chosen was one of the 49 letters that my uncle wrote that ended up in the book about my uncle, the 70 letters from Uncle Dave, the 73-year journey to find a world missing in action World War II paratrooper. And when I wrote the first draft, I was going to put excerpts from letters in. But my developmental editor said, no, you're putting the letters in. They're very important. So I put 49 of 56 letters that I had. I put them in the book.
Mm.
And it turns out that they are like the um, high point of the book in a way. I mean, you get to learn about my uncle, and these letters are interesting. They're fun. He's self-deprecating a lot. He's connected to his siblings. There were, 11 children in the family, and so he wrote letters to a lot of them. And anyway, each one's a little bit different, and what I do is I narrate or set each one up. I just don't have letter after letter. I have a little bit of a indication of what it's about. But anyway, I picked this one. It's the last letter he wrote from Fort Bragg. That was after he had gone through basic training and then paratrooper training and then months and months of additional training to prepare to go to Europe. Although they didn't know where they were going, they were assuming it was probably Europe. And so this is his last letter that he wrote. And a couple of things about it, he connects with his family, as you see, but he's also trying to give them assurance that he will be safe or that he won't take chances. So let me get ahead and read it. Dear folks, this is the last letter I'll be writing from Fort Bragg. It won't leave here until after I do, which won't be later than Tuesday. So that is when this letter finally reaches you. So when this letter finally reaches you, I will be on my way to some port of embarkation on the East Coast here somewhere. You understand that the reason the letter is held is so that no information will leak out to the wrong people. I don't know how long we'll stay in this port of embarkation, but while we're there, we'll have inspections of all kinds and checkups. And when we leave, we'll have everything we need to fight except ammunition, and that won't be very far away. I got a letter from Goldie and Max today. That's his sister Goldie and his brother Max. And a few days ago, I got letters from Ben, Jewel, and Jack. That's 3 of his brothers. But I haven't answered them yet because the mail isn't going out. So will you let them know why I haven't written? You'll get cards with my new address as soon as we leave, so you'll probably know what is going on as soon as I do. I lost a carbine somewhere so that I might have to pay for it. They cost around $60, so I don't like that idea much. My lieutenant said that he would pay for it, but I don't want him to. It really wasn't my fault for losing the thing, but I don't want anyone to pay my bills for me, especially when he didn't have anything to do with losing it. I have bought a lot of V-mail so that it will get home quicker after I get across. You ought to do the same thing because you have lots of letters to send out too. I'm glad to see that Jack got into the Air Corps. He will probably work in a nice soft job like I ought to have, but haven't. Gee, why, I forgot to mention it, but now I have my other stripe. It's sergeant now. It took a long time, but it finally got here. It's better late than never. You should see us when we leave here. We will be dressed just like rookies. We will have to cover up the insignia on our arms and take the patches off our caps so that when we leave here, no one will know we're special troops. Last Wednesday night, when I was coming back from Florida, I saw guards all along the railroad tracks for over 100 miles. So you can see we're getting quite a bit of protection when we leave here. No one from the airborne section of the camp has been allowed to go to town and tell any secrets about when or where we're going, which we don't know ourselves. I wish you could see me all ready to fight. I have my Tommy gun and a carbine and a machete. The machete is a heavy knife about 1.5 feet long that I will use to clear brush out of the way so that I can fire my mortar, and it can be used for other things too. I also have a jump knife. It is a large pocket knife with a blade that jumps out when you press a button and the knife is kept in a secret pocket on the jumpsuit. We also have a trench knife. It is a wicked weapon and can do a lot of damage. I can either use the blade or the knuckles, and they're all bad. That's enough stuff for anyone to fight with, so that you can see we're a pretty tough outfit. Besides that, our company carries other weapons like a rocket launcher that shoots rockets at tanks and which causes a lot of damage. And we also have rifles that shoot grenades, which are also pretty wicked. We also carry twice as many machine guns as any other outfit. Don't think we'll use all these guns at once, though. Being parachuters means that we might fight anywhere or anything, so one time we might use one kind of gun or another time another gun. In any case, we are prepared for anything and afraid of nothing. Maybe one of these days you'll get a letter from me from Berlin or Tokyo, and I hope it isn't too long away, but I'm afraid it is. There, now I've given you a lot of military information that you didn't know before, but I want you to be sure that we will be able to take care of ourselves when the time comes, which I don't expect it to be for a couple of months yet. So I will close with love to Ma and Pa and the rest of you. Don't think about my future too much because this baby isn't taking no chances if he can help it. By the way, how do you like my picture? It was taken some time ago, but I didn't send it home. Well, be careful and don't catch any colds. Dave. So that's just an example of the kinds of letters he wrote home, and you get to know him after you read those letters. You feel like he's your uncle too. So
Yes, letters are amazing.
yeah.
And that's what a heritage you have in those letters.
Yeah, I hadn't read or didn't know about those letters until I just started letting my cousins know that I was researching Uncle Dave, and they said, "Well, I have some stuff. I'll give it to you. You can keep it all."
Wow.
Yeah. So I imagine Skip can identify being in the Army for a career to all that stuff.
Oh my goodness, yes. I was thinking so much about it. You're talking about the weaponry and visualizing some of the armor and some of the others in terms of their weaponry, but the letters. I was thinking about how that's oftentimes that lifeline, and you would go to mail call. This was before you had email or had easier access to phones and so forth. For instance, at Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and we go to mail call and just waiting to hear our name. Oh boy, did I get some mail today.
Yeah.
Happy day if you had mail that day. So it was
It's interesting,
very,
Bill. I was married. My first marriage, my kid's dad, he was in the military, and we were stationed in Berlin, Germany, and we were there when the wall fell. I was actually at Checkpoint Charlie the night they opened the wall. He was on our duty, and he's like, "Get down there."
Whoa.
It was amazing. But we wrote letters home to our extended friends and family. You know how you do a Christmas letter? Well, we did that about every, 3 or 4 weeks, every quarter. And I've recently found those because we're moving.
Wow.
And I read them and I also, there were a whole bunch that I had written home to my parents that my mom had given me. And listening to you read that was just so reminiscent of, because it's the same thing, like it costs a lot. In fact, one of the letters, I'm like, I can't call you anymore this month because our phone bill was way too high and David got mad. And so I have all these letters now. And at some point that might make a whole other book because they chronicled, we were there for a year before and a year after. So we really saw everything that East and West Germany went through as they reunified. It was crazy.
Oh yeah.
Wow,
Wow.
you were right in the middle of some amazing history there.
We were.
History, yeah. I was going to say you participated in an amazing piece of history there.
We did, yeah. And actually, we were at the Brandenburg Gate when they were. And my ex-husband is 6'5", and he was boosting people up onto the Brandenburg Gate, onto the wall there. And those pictures, I'm surprised there's not a picture of him because I have a picture of him doing that. So yeah, it was crazy.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Isn't that interesting how, see, here we are again. We're all kind of got this, the connection thing going on.
Yeah.
Every night there's like a new connection.
Too.
This has just been amazing.
And even
It
though
is
Rick never says, here's the theme for tonight, it just seems like there's always a common theme.
There's always a theme.
You're right.
It's unfortunate that letters are kind of a dying art, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, it's sad. There is. And I always tell my kids, think about the power of the written word. And they understand that after an interview or after something, that handwritten note carries so much weight and so much power and sets you apart from others, because more often than not, almost everybody university will send an email, and it's like, make sure you send the note. I know, Dad. Okay, I'm just reminding you.
Yeah, that's true. My wife and I still send handwritten notes for a lot of things.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So do I was taught thank you notes. I taught my kids to write thank you notes, and they wrote them their entire growing up until they hit 18 and moved out. And I don't think they've ever written another one since.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
I tried.
Where's the thank you notes? Yeah. What's wrong with you guys? You learned how to do this. We taught you how to do this.
Yes.
You know,
Exactly.
you were talking about the power of the written note, Phil, and I was thinking about it. I used to have personalized note cards made up when I was chief medical officer and then chief of my department. And I would send kudo notes to staff in the hospital, staff in my department, medical, the residents there in the medical residency. And I would later go into their offices and I'd see these things tacked up on their boards and so forth. And people come with me, thank you so much for that note. You can't believe what that meant to me. Just that's taking that few minutes to pen a note to them, to acknowledge what I appreciated about something they did or some attribute about them. And they would pin those up and keep those notes.
It just makes it so much more personal.
Yep. It does.
Yeah. Now I want to go write a bunch of letters to people.
And I thought to myself, all those notes that I got from patients and cards that I got from patients, I wish I would have kept those, because there are days that you think, oh my gosh, was that a horrible day, at the office or something. And I thought to myself, I wish I kept those for that sole purpose, to go back on those hard days, to go back and read those, or those heartbreaking days when you've had a patient death, or you've had to give a terrible diagnosis to a patient and a family, and you could go back and read some of those notes and realize, it's painful and it's hard to do this, but this is why I do it. This is what it's all about, is the people, the relationships. This is what makes it worthwhile. And like we're talking about, you grieve deeply because you love deeply, and you hurt deeply because you care deeply. And that's the reality of life. There's that duality. We can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
So true. If we shut ourselves off from pain, we shut ourselves off from love, don't we?
Yep.
Indeed.
Is that Levi?
Oh, Levi's bugging Luke. It's time to end the broadcast. Anyway,
Yeah.
we'll end on that note of thank you for sharing about the letters, and thank you for all your authenticities tonight, sharing your pain and how God has used that to minister to others.
It's been a great evening, and another great